Hello, good evening. Hope you all are having a good day, whether it be morning or evening or even tomorrow for some of you. For those of you over here on this time zone, happy Thursday evening. Um, how is am I loud enough? I've been having a little bit of mic issues today, so if you cannot hear me, please say so and I'll try to do some adjustments. Well, anyway, it's good to see everybody. There's a lot to talk about on Letecia. We stopped last week on day 7. They took that break on Thursdays. I like doing Thursdays because that court is closed on Thursdays. So it's a good day to catch up. We got like 4 days to review. There's so much, listen, all the Letecia Stauch trial, basically, she's already said she did it. She did. She said she did it. And now we have to hear how horribly she did it. There's a lot of evidence that talks about the scene, the state of the body, the condition the body was found, a lot of evidence in regards to the cleanup that was done. We've heard a lot of testimony that way. Well, I'm curious if you all are thinking, as I am, that the prosecution currently, and with most of the witnesses, especially the law enforcement officers, is doing a decent job of actually proving that she was sane. What do you think? I think the question is going to be leaning towards sane or leaning towards insanity, as far as the evidence that you have seen as of today. We'll see how this is at the end of the show. Yes. Okay, there we go. I'll even give you an undecided. I know quite a few of you all that are going to pick that one. Here we go. Okay. Hey, Tony. Nice to see you. Hey, Quiz. You're sneaking in. I'll see you guys. All right. So, Letecia Stauch. Okay, on Friday, they continued with Detective Jess Bethel. Now, remember, she was the primary as far as the law enforcement officers there in Colorado that were running the case. She ended up to be the one, even though she came in, didn't go to the scene until February. Once things started to look a little bit sketchy, they put a lead detective in. And Jess Bethel was that person. She was like the liaison. Everything was going through her. This is also the detective that through the interview. Now, if you were watching Friday or if you've been watching on the social medias, there's a really long interview that came out on Letecia when she was waiting and everything. That's very long. They did play it for the court. I'm not going to play it for you, of course. It's available everywhere. It's long and it's tedious, but I do believe that the way they went about it was to show that Letecia is not insane. She's just ornery. She's problematic. She's entitled. She tried to manipulate. If you watch that video, you see every trick in the book coming out from this woman. She says she can't breathe. She says, got to do this. This is after the interview when they end up sending her to the hospital to be checked out. And we had heard prior testimony already from other law enforcement officers that she left. We heard from the nurse that she left the scene before she had her essay exam. She was telling a story about an intruder in her home, about her being attacked, that could be related to the missing child. Okay, and when they tried to do something about it and gather evidence for her claims, and so that this person could be pursued, she did everything she could to avoid any information that could lead to her attacker. And this is what Jess Bethel was going through. And she got called in late on this stuff. She was going over all of the stuff, trying to interview Letecia, not getting anywhere, getting the roundabout. Of all the witnesses that we have seen to date, Detective Jess Patel. She really, my sympathy goes to her. She had the interview altercations with her. She tried to reason with her at the house. She tried to get information. She tried to get her the help she needs. She's trying to treat her fairly and unbiased, and she's just getting nothing but insanity. Not insanity like in a crazy way, but like ridiculousness. She's getting nothing but, let's just call it shenanigans out of Letecia Stauch. She just will not cooperate. She's her own worst enemy. She's not cooperating at all. She completely acts like somebody who's got something to hide. Paranoid. You name it. Hey, Mippit. Yes, like a petulant child. Yes, I was thinking that always. That's a very good way to look at it. Because also during Detective Bethel's testimony, we learned that they went, they had to go to South Carolina to get Letecia Stauch. Remember, they had a probable cause warrant for questioning and for more examination. They were bringing her back to Colorado. It was a 24-hour trip. She had Detective Riley and another detective were in the car with Jess Bethel. And this is where you're going to learn more details in regards to Leticia's attempted escape from handcuffs and everything. What happened was she got out of the handcuffs, she picked up a Monster drink, and she smashed, I believe it was Detective Riley, in the face with it. Not very nice. There's a clip of the video. It's everywhere. But like, it was a 24-hour drive, and for most of it, Detective Bethel testified that she was, playing cards, games, talking. Everything was fine. It didn't seem like anything. And all of a sudden she turned. And then when she turned, she was like, oh, she's been horrible to me. Oh, I won't cooperate with her. I'll only let you put the handcuffs on me. She was just being absolutely ridiculous. And it's just more evident that if she's trying to do all this to prove that she was insane, it's actually just showing, well, to me, I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, it actually shows her being conniving in her full wits, doing anything she can to get out of any trouble that may be brewing. She's pretty well knows that something's up, because that's why she left. Okay. Once that interview happened in January, okay, and she knew they were starting to look at her a little bit differently. She moved out of the house on January 31st. The young boy is only missing less than a week. She moves out of the house and starts beating feet and finding other things. She starts staying in hotels and all this other stuff. She moves out. Okay. She's not going to stay. She starts to act like a guilty person in my eyes. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm wondering what the jury's thinking. The jury's been taking a lot of notes. They had a lot of, on Friday, they had a lot of consultation prior to actually testimony in regards to the mental health testing that was done on Letecia Stauch. Now, all of that is eventually going to be sealed. It is a mental health thing. They do that often. There was a bit going back and forth about how many times the test was taken and what Torres was going to be reporting on. Of course, this is a key to the defense. So it's very important that they keep out anything that says that she's saying. Absolutely. In my estimation, the prosecution's doing a pretty good job of showing her as being quite calculating and of her faculties when all this was going on, regardless of her claims of not being in her right mind. She was able to function completely. And the manipulation is coming through over and over and over again. Jess Bethel is the one who also had the attack, was in the vehicle when the attack happened. She was also the one on the witness stand when, if you saw my lovely thumbnail, and I'll bring it up for you. When Letecia decided to, yeah, you had to deal with me. Yeah, you're calling me out. Yeah, you're telling everybody how sane and I'm of my right mind. Repeatedly gave this woman the finger on the stand. Repeatedly. Okay. And it got caught and sent. I mean, I've got these are not the only shots. I've got so many different ones of this on the same day. That day she just could not help. She was annoyed. She didn't like the testimony. It was just Bethel has experience as a detective. She's very well experienced. She's dealt with plenty of people with mental health issues, people who have children who have problems. She says in all of her dealings with Letecia that Letecia was perfectly sane and of her right mind, able to make decisions. And that kind of spoke volumes to the jury, I think, because here's somebody who has experience with people going through things like missing children, going through um, struggles of trying to find out where a child is. And her testimony is that Letecia didn't act like that. Mm-hmm. Uh, Detective Bethel has been in law enforcement for 14 years. She's she's not a lightweight. Okay. She has worked with incarcerated inmates. She has worked with she has worked with people who are on the edge, who have mental disorders or don't. But she stated that in her experience, she's had multiple contact with people suffering from mental health disorders. She sees it often. She has experience with lots of people in public and has often been approached for information and or for complaints that she has to investigate numerous people with mental health disorders. She's had people with mild mental health disorders and severe mental health disorders come across her path. Okay. She does not believe that of all the people that she has run across with any types of mental health issues at all, Jess Bethel testified that Letecia never even got close to any point of a mental health issue at all in any of her interactions with her. And even the assault, that was more like a desperate, like just trying to get out of here because she didn't want to go back to Colorado to face the music. Okay. The defense had asked Bethel the definition of sanity, which is not based on a definition in the DSM. And then there was an objection by the prosecution about whether or not sanity is actually in the DSM. And then that's when prosecution came back to talk about it and gave her information as to how long she's been doing it, the kind of people she runs across, and why she feels that in her definition of sanity that Letecia Stauch was saying. The jury had some questions for Bethel, but the judge, after reading the questions, decided that there were other witnesses that were more appropriate to answer that question, and so he held the question. Oh, okay. That it was an interesting way to start the day. Let me just check your questions here. I don't want to go too far into people without looking for your questions. Exactly. Let me put that up with the picture. If she was insane, she wouldn't be flipping the bird like that when people are testifying against her with good information. Yeah, Mousy, I hear you. You want to just be doing some things, don't you? And hi, how you doing? Yeah. She's quite irritating, I have to admit. This is not a favorite. This is not a good one to follow. Although I am curious as to how they're going to lay out this insanity plea. I am really piqued to listen to the defense as to what the defense is going to be pulling up that shows that she was out of her mind at the time, unless you just use the awfulness of the crime itself. Well, that just makes you a monster. It doesn't necessarily make you insane. It makes you not normal, like as an average person who would never do that to someone, especially not anyone you know or care about. I would say it says a lot of other things about her, but it doesn't say she's crazy. Oh, not like that. Not the way they're trying to say it. I mean, if you remember the opening of the defense, they're trying to say that she just, with everything that's happened in her life and all the abuse that she suffered, it just all came to a head at that very moment. And just in that time with Gannon, that's when she worked it all out. And then she was fine after and acted like it never happened. No, I don't know. I mean, I do understand that people can have breaks and these kind of things can happen, but I don't think they're going to be able to get somebody to testify within that short period of time. That's what happened and why and what that child could have done to trigger such a thing. Yes, there should. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you, Quiz. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. That'll save a lot of talking later. All right, so back to court. Okay, so with as I said, Judge Werner, one of my favorite judges, by the way. Oh, just how soft spoken he is and very direct. Okay. Anyway, in regards to the finger, Judge Werner admonished her. He reminded her he has control of his courtroom and he's going to look at the pictures to see what she did. Well, she needs to remember that he's responsible for the conduct that goes on in here, and he has ways to control it. Everyone in the courtroom, including her, and he will. Okay, and we'll get to that when we get to Monday, but let's finish up with Friday. So we had another CSI. We had a crime scene investigator by the name of Christian Luer then came up. Okay, and they had responded to the scene. Basically, they're checking just in the beginning of February again. Remember, at first it was just a missing child. They weren't so sure, but then things got a little sketchy. They decided to treat the whole place like a crime scene in early February. Okay. When they got there, he did a lot of the blue star and the blood testing. He's talking about the process of blue star and how it reacts to oxidizing agents and cleaning agents, even bleach, horseradish, things like that. Additional testing needs to be done when blue star is used to prove that it's blood and or DNA, to do all of that. However, they do use it to look for when a site's been cleaned up, to find remnants of what they would suspect to be blood and or where the blood had been cleaned up. And he did a really good job of explaining that whole process. Oh, yes, always grateful. Always is reminding me that one of the main reasons you can actually lean towards Letecia actually being sane is the fact that she's able to keep track of all these different stories and construct them all and then just plug. She actually thinks she's making that look more like she's crazy, but it actually is actually leaning the other way, especially when she constructs it around evidence that they've already found or trying to mislead them into other directions than where she's going. Hey, Fish Nerd. How you doing? You know what, Fish Nerd? I'll put that back up because that's a good call me. Is it me, or is there not an ounce of regret in any of those pictures? No, there's not. Look at that face. This is not someone who is moved by what she's done. Not at all. Not at all. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. The lack of concern that she has. It's all like her. Yes, always. I agree. He was very thorough in how he explained it, how all the testing was done in the home. But basically, his testimony was all of that. Can we all agree, not to go into the actual details of that, but to agree that they found blood in places they didn't really think that they would? Let's just say Gannon's bedroom, bloody mess. Storage room, blood, going down to the stairs, going into the laundry room, in a lot of places. A lot of places where you'd be walking back and forth if you were cleaning all of this up. Drops of blood here, splatters here, cleaning stuff here. In his opinion, it definitely looked like a scene that had been attempted to be immaculately cleaned up, as several of those people had testified prior. But basically, his testimony was basically about how they're all proving that, which there are a lot of evidence folders, and I'm going to do you, here is a link to this day from the Reddit. Okay, I'm putting it here in the chat for you. The Reddit for this day here, that'll take you right to the Reddit post for that day in the Gannon Stauch Reddit, where they'll actually list out all of the evidence pictures that were posted. They're not going to show you the pictures, but they're going to tell you what was in the pictures. Okay, because everything else is sealed. Okay. It was definitely a mess, and where it wasn't a mess, it was definitely obvious that somebody cleaned up. I mean, that's basically the bones of this testimony. But they took lunch and everything. He was on there for a long time. Okay, there's a lot of photos of the house and everything. On cross-examination by the defense, they just brought up about the comforter um and the sheet that were on the bed, and he said that a sheet in the closet had blue star reaction. In the northwest basement bedroom in the teenager girl's room, there was a blood stain on the mattress and the comforter. Same source of blood from the mattress and the comforter, all the same. Okay, and in the laundry basket there was a sheet that had blood star reaction also that had been cleaned up. Okay, and that was cross examination. The defense. All right. The jury had two questions. How is testing done to separate the blue star from blood? Which was a good question from the jury. This is from the jury, and he answered that the blue star is not a component of blood. DNA tests for a different type of material than blue star. It does not override the DNA. In other words, if they do get a positive for the DNA and whose it is, the blue star treatment and actually using blue star to look through the evidence here did not affect the DNA on any of the samples. And that's a very important part, because a lot of times when you're trying to prove not guilt, you're trying to prove that the samples are contaminated if there's any DNA or blood. But he did a very good job of explaining how they can separate the blue star from this. And I was quite impressed. The second question from the jury was, does blue star impact the DNA sample at all? And the amount of sprayed would impact the sample, but not blue star itself. In other words, you would be able to thin out the DNA, okay, but it doesn't negatively affect DNA processing. It just makes it a thinner sample. It just you know what I'm saying? It doesn't affect the DNA itself, which was a very strong point. Okay. Yes, I agree. Always that house was a mess. Was a mess. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with that. Like narcissistic tendencies and everything there. I definitely see that, Fish Nerd. Yes, Sandra, that house was a violent mess. Blood splatters everywhere. Anna, I agree. The when you hear the testimony, absolutely. And Tony, for comparison, look at how Darrell Brooks behaved in court. He has serious mental health issues. Even though they were not used as mitigating factors in his trial, his behavior in court was insane. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And yet he's not getting an insanity plea either. Yeah, it's crazy. Mm, mm. I hear you. Yeah, that's the most frustrating part of that. It says she thinks the last ditch effort she's going to get away with this. The whole time she tried to control the situation, including the judge. Remember all those letters to the judge? Remember how she had to defend herself because no one could understand her the way she understands her. No one understands what she went through. Defense doesn't even sympathize with her. She could not find a lawyer that was adequate. She needed to go through a mental health evaluation to say that she was competent enough to actually defend herself, which she went through and got permission to defend herself. And lo and behold, then afterwards, when all this other stuff comes forward, she decides, nope, get a defender. I'm going for the insanity plea, and I need a lawyer now. Yep. Yeah. Tell me about it. No, just that flipping alone proves to me she's sane. Sean, all of this evidence everywhere makes me sick. How long did he suffer, or was this from many months? No, his death was one day, Sean, one horrible day. And I will just say, to give you an answer on that, 18 stab wounds, a bullet in the head, blunt head trauma, 2 bullets that are in the pillow. Okay. All of this, he went missing. He was seen earlier in the day. He was missing. He was seen that night, missing the next day, in one day. She did not hold him anywhere and torture him, although that day could have been horrific. It does look, there are she says burn marks. He says in a recorded call that he was worried about burns on his arms. There does appear to be some injury to him before he died on his arms, whether that was from him dropping a candle and some wax on himself or a fire that started that she keeps talking about putting out. This is a story that is through every one of her stories, the fire part. But I don't think it went longer than just the incident. Always says, I am so impressed with this jury and the questions which have been posed. It definitely shows they are paying attention and working the additional information. Yes, I want them to concentrate more on state of mind than process, though, because remember, she's already said she's guilty. Although I find the Blue Star information fascinating, and I do think they've nailed it in the amount of evidence that is left behind. They are concentrating on the fact that she cleaned up and tried to hide what she did, which also proves the level of sanity right there to protect oneself. She had that would show she knows right from wrong. She knew she would get in trouble. She knew she would get in trouble. That shows you know right from wrong. She wasn't that far out of her mind. And I know it's necessary because it's all part of the crime that it all like leads together. But just more questions on what they felt would be the difference. Like how would somebody who was out of their mind act, so they can compare it, because that's going to be the final thing for the jury on whether or not she was actually sane. He did, Sandra. He may have had issues, ADHD. They're talking about issues that he had, but that smile is just so heartbreaking. It really is. Okay. So they talked. So once the jury questions were asked, then they brought up a ballistics expert. Oh, where's my ballistic expert name? Hold on 1 second. That's Stephanie Happ. Okay. Now, Stephanie Happ it's a straightforward firearm examiner. They're going to talk about the pistols that were found in the house. They're going to talk about the casings. They're going to talk about how things get marked, how you can prove it's a gun. A bullet came from a certain gun. All your standard firearms kind of stuff. No doubt about it that this gun was used. It was like from, it was in the head. The only thing, there's some speculation on DNA that's on the gun, the bullets. Is it because that's in the suitcase with the decomposing body that they find it? And there was some stuff back and forth about that. But the biggest thing about Stephanie Happ is the problem with Juror 12. Seems that once Stephanie Happ got up on the stand, Juror 12 realized that she knew her because she had been with her mother or her mother-in-law or someone who was working on something. She went with her family to her house through church to talk about something. She realized she had a casual encounter with her twice in regards to that, but she did not know she knew it. She did not recognize the name on the witness list or anything like that. It wasn't until she saw her face. She reported it immediately after the testimony at the end, but it does appear that even though she could keep the information that she received during the trial separate from her actual encounter with Stephanie Happ, because they were totally unrelated and didn't mean anything, and it doesn't really add anything to the context. She did report it because they had asked her before, and she didn't realize, just like they asked all jury members if they knew anyone on the witness list. And actually, the prosecution didn't have any trouble with it. They said she's obviously going to be able, because of her good conscience, to report it, and that she knows it might be a problem and she did the right step. That shows conscientiousness. I do believe she could keep it separate. It's not going to be a big deal. But defense kind of pushed back and said, we want to stick to protocol. She didn't answer. She misanswered the question. She's bringing forward the private information. I give her good credit for that. But let's follow procedure. And she knows the witness, so she's out. She's out. And so they said, the judge said it's going to think about it. Okay. Well, let's jump ahead so I don't have to do it. He comes back and he says, I'm sorry. At the very next session, he excuses Juror 12. Okay. Because remember, after Stephanie Happ, there were other witnesses. She waited till the end of the day. She reported the problem. Here they go. In the morning, they come in. He excuses Juror 12. No fault of her own. They did the right thing. But they just don't want anything on appeal if defense objected, and I can't really blame them, So they go through, again, the same link that I gave you is for the same day. If you go down farther, you'll find all of the evidence numbers and the photos that are listed and what went on with that. But there was a lot about left and right-handed pistols going on with this, okay? And basically it says a right-handed shooter is right eye dominant and a left-handed shooter is left eye dominant. She did say that left-handed people are better with semi-automatic pistols that eject to the left. And I don't know why all of this matters in regards to any of this, because didn't Letecia already admit to killing Gannon? So I don't know why they had to go into great detail about all of this, but they did. Not too long, just long enough to me want to wonder why the hell what are they getting at? Okay. The jury did have a question for the weapon expert also. Oop, where's my jury question? Did any of the 3 pistols eject from the left? No. Okay, was the answer. If someone is left eye dominant and a shell ejects across your field of vision, would it cause someone to miss? The first shot, nothing would be obstructing your vision. Subsequent shots fired after that in rapid succession, it becomes a concern when multiple rounds are fired where the shells are constantly running in the shooter's field of vision. And I think that in this point, what they're trying to prove is, yes, Letecia's first shot is the one that killed Gannon, but she actually shot at him more than once, and that's the other 2 are in the pillar over with, and that's how that happened. Okay. Let me just check for questions. A follow-up, a redirect by the prosecution just clears up that many things determine accuracy, firearm, whether the shooter is practiced, and all of that. Left eye dominant can be accurate with a gun that ejects to the right. In other words, it doesn't really matter if it ejected to the left or right. You can be accurate if you do it right. It doesn't mean it's going to automatically always miss, which was a good and valid point on the part of the prosecution for whatever defense was trying to throw out there. Thank you for becoming a member again, Sean. Good to have you back. Good to have you here. The defense even said if they had used up all of their exclusions, had they known this, they would have excluded her. Yes, they would have. And they would have if they knew that she knew her, which is why I do believe that the judge made the right decision in having her step down. Juror number 12 did everything that she was supposed to do. Right. She only knew her first name. She recognized her from her face, though, that she absolutely knew her. So, it was no harm, no foul, but these things happen, right? I mean, it's just like a blip. It's not going to really affect anything because we have alternates for this, The next witness on Monday was Brooke Bell. She's a CSI investigator also with Colorado Springs. She'd worked there for about six years or so. Okay. She is going to be qualified as an expert in crime scene investigation. The same as Christian Mueller. Okay. She does a lot of the collection and preservation of evidence for testing. Okay. She said that, all of this collecting and testing definitely takes a lot longer than it does on the TV shows. That was quite humorous of her to bring that up. But yes, it does. She also helps to coordinate things. She gets briefings from detectives, police officers, and other members of an investigation just to get an idea of what she's actually looking for at the crime scene. So she was versed on what had happened there or what they believed to have happened there. And she is one of the ones who actually responded on the 29th of January. All she knew at that time is the child was missing. Remember, on January 29th, they didn't think Letecia had done anything to him yet. I mean, they had normal suspicions that you might when you're looking for a child, but there wasn't anything that led them the other way so far. She got her case briefing. She was told about the carpet being burned, cut out, covered up. She had also received the information about Letecia saying that she had contacted somebody to fix the carpet and was in the house. So while she was looking at the crime scene, she was also looking up evidence of anyone else actually of being there. Okay. She used an alternate light source, which shows things like biological fluids, saliva, semen, urine, body fluids of any type. She focused on the downstairs living room where that burned carpet was, where Letecia, in several of her stories, says that some of these attacks with these strangers, these other third parties that she keeps bringing in, have occurred. Um, she also concentrated on Gannon's room, and she received information from the detectives that Letecia was now saying something about Gannon may have been kidnapped. Okay, so she focused on those areas, because if he had been dragged out of there and etc. There is a lot of the exhibition photographs again, from also of the shoes that they found. All of the evidence. Remember that we talked about it before. The shoes that she was wearing were found with DNA and blood on them. All of this just helps reinstate that she did it. But again, they're concentrating on the fact that things got cleaned up. hmm There was a saturation stain on the carpet. Could have been a type of transfer if something had sat on it. They said that some of the pieces of carpet that were caught were inconsistent with a candle spill. Um, she said that a candle spill might not necessarily have lit that carpet. She said it would have had to be really, really hot and sustained heat to light that carpet on fire. She's like blowing that story of Leticia's away about the candle lighting the carpet on fire. Um, she said that she swabbed that area where the carpet was caught because the detective mentioned an unusual odor in Gannon's room near the center and near the light switch. She detected an odor, but she could not place it as traditional bleach or cleaning product. The odor of urine was throughout the basement, though. But there were two dog crates in the basement, which is probably accounts for the odor. Um, there was like saws in the garage, things like this. They took pictures of everything. It was very, very thorough. Well, they're taking pictures everywhere that they found the droplets from before. Oh goodness. All right. We end. They ended with more evidence being brought in. Okay, and then remember that juror 12 was going to be questioned, and the judge did that, and then Letecia also gets her admonishment here from the judge, and then we're going to go on to Monday. Monday is trial day 9, the 17th of April, and on this day, um we actually start. Let me bring it up. We start with finishing up. They start at of course, before the jury gets in there. They start about Dr. Torres again, and the defense saying that only certain people should be able to review the report. Prosecution wants a copy of it. Judge Werner, like I said, grants a protection order. There'll be no copies or distributions to anyone not associated with the case or not in the defense or prosecution counsel's office, period. And both sides must take sufficient steps to make sure that the data stays private. Okay. And after the case, both sides will need to provide their copies for destruction. He wants it that private. It's a mental health thing, and only what comes up in court will be out there. Actual copies of the report are not to be distributed at all and must be destroyed or turned in. Okay. They are going to they're going to upload it sealed, okay, instead of to the parties direct, and it's not going to be unsealed without court order. Okay. Then of course Letecia gets her admonishment. The judge tells her straight out. This, let me just say, he said she has the right and obligation to stay there for her trial, okay, to see the evidence and communicate with her lawyers and to assist in her defense. However, she has the right for the jury not to see her in restraints, so that they don't see her as a prisoner and it's not prejudiced against her. However, those rights are not without limitation. If she's going to act like this, basically the judge told her, I will have your hands chained to the desk if you can't control yourself, and you can sit there with your hands uncomfortably for the week, or I could put you in another room and then bring you in at every break and ask if you're going to behave, and just keep you out, keep you uncomfortable. He says, not cushy back wherever that you just get to do what you want. You're going to have to behave. We could put a bolt on either side of the table with your hands cuffed to the bolt. Okay, it's going to be uncomfortable. Okay, she knows how uncomfortable those bolts are. She also knows how uncomfortable those holding cells are in the courthouse. All right, but anyway, she needs to start over. So on court today, when we start, okay, the first thing they do is bring Miss Bell back, because they forgot to mention a few things they said, okay, that they definitely wanted to go over. And it was just really, really brief. It was basically just that there were no cartridge cases located at the residence. They would have been collected and placed into evidence. By the time she went back afterwards, they would have all been collected. So she found none there. And that she did find prescription medications, that they were collected. Okay. And this was on their second or third. This was in February when they found all of them. They found prescriptions that were collected. One was Paragol, which is like a form of a Tylenol. Okay. And they found Gannon's lisdexamfetamine, amoxicillin for Harley, doxycycline for the canine. Okay. However, what they did not find was any prescription or bottle for the hydrocodone. It was gone. Okay. They did not find, remember, the prescription that Gannon was drugged with. Okay. The whole next testimony is from Harley Hunt, which, if you all recall, was a name you heard a lot of. She was in the interview, she was the daughter, Harley, that got called over by Letecia in the interview that we played last time. It showed her perfectly sane, but not actually contributing very much into the search of Gannon, but very upset about how other people were reporting on it and just had to talk about it. Well, Harley Hunt then took the stand for her daughter. She was obviously distraught. And the reason I put another picture of Harley up here with her is to see how she was a smiley she's young, she's fresh, she doesn't look like she's got a care in the world. But there is a very worried, tense and sad young woman that testified at the trial. The difference was remarkable. If you see Harley Hunt on TikTok, you would not recognize, you would recognize the features, but the whole attitude and demeanor of the woman that was on the stand actually struck me. She's brokenhearted because she admits during her testimony she believed her mother. She believed she couldn't do anything to Gannon. She loved Gannon and Lana. They were like little brothers and sisters. There were pains in the neck sometimes, just like an older sister would always say. But she didn't see any kind of real trouble, like real problem with how everything was going. She testified in regards to, how long they've been together with Al, how long they've been married, that Al at first didn't have custody of the children, and that came later. It was an adjustment, for the whole family to get together, as it always is when you're bringing step families together. But I kind of really felt for her. I do think she's a bit naive. I think she might have known a little bit of what stuff was going on, but she may have believed her mother that the things that had to be taken care of, cleaned up, or done away with were because people would get the wrong idea about something that she had nothing to do with, that it would just look worse than it was, But yeah, I think it was Judge Werner did make the proper correct in calling her out on her antics. I really do. I know he let her straight know who was in charge of that courtroom. Always, I agree. She does kind of make those gestures, but now she's sitting between her attorneys right in front of the judge. Um, and I'm glad that he like did that. Like she's got to sit like right up in front, and I think he is watching her. She did make more gestures on Monday, somewhat, while her daughter was on the stand. Absolutely, I mean, absolutely. Um, right now, I can't imagine what Harley is going through, but during the testimony, it was absolutely very difficult. There are a lot of questions. She's been dealing with the prosecution with a lot of, she was there for so much of it. Leticia's arrest, Letecia trying to get away. She was, from the day Gannon went missing, it was just Letecia and Harley together like all the time. But that's not unusual. They were anyway. Um, she did appear quite fearful and um, uncomfortable to be there. She just remember, like, all along she believed her mother was innocent, even after her mother got arrested. All of this up until Letecia pled guilty and reason of insanity. She didn't let anybody know, and Harley finds out that Letecia is admitting to doing it, that she did it. All along, she was like mad at Al for abandoning everybody and thinking she could do it, and mad at everybody who was like blaming Letecia. She was trying to help her, and now she finds out that she did it. She's saying she did it. It had to be devastating for her, and especially when she thinks about everything that happened and how she may be complicit in helping to cook. Who she went to get all the supplies. I mean, Letecia was ordering her around, telling her what calls to take, telling her what to say. All of this comes out in the trial. This is a very long day of testimony. I'm going to give you a Reddit link for this one also, which has bullets on it. But this is a whole day. Those of you that watched it, if any of you actually watched the testimony already, what I'm curious, what struck out to you the most um in regards to her testimony? I mean, it was long. There's like several parts. Um, I'm going looking at like you know, during this testimony, they bring up the receipts, they bring up all these text messages and calls, they talk about the whereabouts tracking of everywhere they went together. Um, it's long, very long. She did appear fearful, Sandra. I agree. She seemed very timid, you know. Remember her car got seized. I mean, she was being looked at. She's being looked at here also. She was with Letecia all the time. Um, I really felt for her. I mean, it seemed like many people felt for her, even even the prosecution and the judge. They were so kind. You're right, always. I was just going to mention that they were so gracious about ensuring that she was holding up through her testimony, asking if she needed a break, and taking a moment here and there, and going on. They were quite sympathetic, and it was good to see because it was quite the tiring and exhausting and emotionally draining. I mean, she's already trying to deal with the fact that her mother lied to her too. Okay, right to her, and there seemed to be a bit of a strain there. Um, it does appear that they are not on the terms that they were. Okay. Cross examination is basically just about some of the facts. Defense showing that Harley knows her very well because it was just the two of them after she split up with her father. After Letecia split up with Harley's father. Um, Defense asked Harley directly if she remembered coming home and finding Letecia in a closet, curled up and crying. And Harley said no. Defense says they've met together, and she told him then that the prosecution objects to all of this indirect impeachment. Um, the judge says if it is impeachment, they need a different approach. In other words, they're trying to say that Harley's not remembering things exactly accurately because it is going against some of the things Letecia is saying. Remember, Letecia has always used Harley as an excuse or a confirm of whatever she wants to put out there. You watched her try to do it during the interview, right? We watched her do it with Harley. Everybody did. They sent her in testimony already. And even here, the defense is trying to pick on things that Leticia's saying, oh no, Harley's seen me curled up in a closet before, like hysterical. Like she knows I've got mental like this. They're trying, and it's not going anywhere because Harley is not actually cooperating at this point. Okay. Harley says she was often in the closet texting and crying, or other things when she was growing up. But Harley says she was never crying for no apparent reason at all. Never that she recalls. Um, they talk about some incidences where um, Letecia had acted a little bit erratic about something happening to her, and Harley and her friend were very concerned, and she would not actually say where she was, that they actually had to break in and find her with an app. Um, there was a time that Harley did appear to believe that Letecia may have been suicidal, or she had thought she was in the hospital for cancer, but she had been told so many other things. They had tracked her to a hospital once when trying to find her. They talked much about using different names. Harley doesn't remember most of the names Letecia put down for what she calls her DID personalities. Harley does not recall interacting with any of the majority of them. Um, Harley definitely put a dent um, in most of the testimony of that Letecia tried to put out there that Harley would prove that she wasn't exactly sane. Well, they did focus very much on traveling around with the body, because remember they had the van, and with the green suitcase was in the first van and moved to the second van. Okay, when Hardy thinks that when she was in when she was first interviewed rather by the FBI investigators, she does feel that she was being honest, but she was guarded because at that time she believed 100% that her mother was innocent, and she didn't volunteer anything and only actually offered information very strictly to what they were talking about. And she does admit to being very careful about it based on her mother telling her that they're trying to frame her. And she did believe that her mother was innocent at the time. She does believe she was upfront, but she did believe that her mother, she believed her mother and she absolutely didn't want anything to do with it. Okay. But that was mostly before Gannon's body was discovered. When once they discovered Gannon's bodies, things started to get a little bit different because she started to put some coincidences together and have some questions. She still believed her mom, but she didn't. She didn't actually stop believing her mom until last November, the November that just passed, and that was because she pled guilty. All along, she did think that something may have happened, but that her mother was just trying to not get nailed for it. And she didn't agree with everything that her mother was doing, but she did believe her mother was innocent. I mean, she was in a rock and a hard place, this child. It's one thing that's very important. Harley has been with Letecia all of this time, and Harley put on a record that her mother was never treated for any mental illness that she was ever aware of, ever. So that was a big one there. Oh boy, goes on to very long. Harley at one point eventually hired an attorney because the questioning was getting quite demanding. She really didn't want anything to do with it, and she says that several times during her testimony. Uh, They go into great details about the days, the day of the disappearance, the day after the disappearance, her talk with the FBI investigators. She did testify that between the time that Letecia got arrested from South Carolina into Colorado, that she had been living with Dee Dee, and she got financial support from her aunt. And it was her aunt who bought her the car. But she later had a disagreement with her aunt and she took it back. Um, she did set up a GoFundMe page because she said she needed money because she lost everything. She didn't have a vehicle anymore because her aunt took it back. She was having difficulty getting back and forth from to nursing school. She said she lost both of her parents practically because, you know, the defense reminds her she didn't actually lose both her parents, that her mother was still around. And she said, well, my mother was in jail and I've lost her. She's in jail and I have lost her. She pushes back, which I give her a little credit. That had to be pretty hard. She asked if her mother did anything to prepare her for after she went to jail in regards to what was coming, and she testified no. Um, she said that in the beginning people were very nice and helped her, but she was actually thrown out in the world with nothing and no one. Even her aunt cut her off and took her car after she spoke to the FBI because Letecia had everybody convinced that they were trying to frame her. So because Harley actually gave the interview with the FBI, the aunt cut her off. Um, in regards to the traveling in the car in the vans where they say that the suitcases were there, Harley did testify about the air conditioning being used. Harley said it was cold and she wanted to turn it off, but Letecia said it was too hot and she had to keep it on. It's sometimes for herself, it's sometimes for the dog, you know. She also testified that Harley had to find out on the internet how her dad had really died because Letecia hadn't told her the truth about that either. And that was quite emotional for her to reveal. The jury had questioned for Harley. Did you see a large green suitcase loaded into the second van? And Harley's response was no. The night your mom asked you to say goodnight to Gannon, do you have a specific recollection of seeing any part of his actual skin? And she testified that she saw just his head. The morning of the first day in Pensacola, Florida, when you left the hotel, do you recall if the van was in a different parking spot than when you checked in? And Harley testified that she did not remember where they parked. It was always towards the back of the hotel, but she could not tell if it had moved. During your time living in Colorado Springs, did it appear to you that Gannon was treated more strict or more unfair by your mom? And she testified no. And again, that goes to the testimony she had that she didn't see any difference in how Letecia had been um, uh, treating him. There is a follow-up photo of one of the evidence items, number evidence 40, is a photo of the green suitcase. And she said that she remembers the suitcase from moving to Alaska or any time they moved. However, after January or February, she didn't recall seeing it at all again. That was the end of Monday. Let me check you for questions as we go here. Um, True. I'm glad you saw the like. I'm gonna put that up in a second. Let me just see what else. Yeah. One thing that stuck out with me was when she tried to turn off the air conditioner in the van, and her mom snapped back at her. Letecia knew she needed to keep it as cold as possible. This is true because it was winter. She used the dogs, like in every vehicle there. She used the dogs for an excuse, or that she was overhauled. She made sure that air conditioner stayed on every time, and they traveled a lot together. Yep. Harley seemed just to do what her mother told her to do and knew not to question her mother. This is true. It seems like that's the type of, it was a very supportive relationship, and she just went along with whatever mom said. Mom knew everything. Yep. Yes, Harley even said that she didn't really question her mom. She didn't about anything. She just went along with it. And now she's having some regrets. You know, Harley repeatedly said, I agree with this. Harley seemed to say her mom was saying. Harley pushed back really hard on all of that about, crying for no reason, hospital trips, for mental health issues. Harley says she never knew of any. And she said that adamantly. They did pin up some instances that Letecia told them that there was some truth to, but not what Letecia was saying. There is a time when her and her friend went and looked for Letecia because she was talking about some crazy stuff and things like that. But no, she pushed back hard and seemed to say, nope, my mom is sane because I've been dealing with her every day for all of this time. And no, she never really appeared to be insane. Okay. There were times when you could see Letecia holding her fingers to her lips when Harley was testifying, as if to signal her to be quiet. Yes, she wanted her to stop talking or to not say too much or to let the truth slip out in any way at all. I actually I was wondering if anybody else saw that. She did. She didn't do the middle finger. Well, she often had them up there as if in a quiet thing. The defense seemed very rude to Harley. It's almost like Letecia said she was going to lie or something, even though Harley's up there trying to tell the truth. They pushed back on some things and specific things that Harley was going hard on that that didn't happen. They were trying to push back. And a lot of that was scurrying notes back and forth with Letecia in the defense. They did actually treat her more like a hostile witness, Yep, they were treating her like a hostile witness for sure. Always says, I was glad to see Harley push back against the defense when they would try to manipulate and twist some of her other testimony. Yes, she clarified. She tried to reiterate. If she saw that they were trying to say something that she didn't actually mean that way, she was pushing it back really well. Really well. Well, good evening, Wrecker. Okay, so we're going to go on to Tuesday. Okay, that was the end of court for Harley. If you don't have any other questions on Harley, we'll go on to Tuesday, which was the 18th. Okay, on this one, we're going to go through a lot of financial transactions and stuff like this. They entered into evidence number 279, a disc containing a banking financial transaction summary. It wasn't formally admitted before, but it's being because there's some kind of stipulation, but they were just going back and forth about that for a while. Okay. I'm going to give you the copy to this Reddit because they actually list some links to the timelines to the certain days that happened in the beginning. January 26th, January 27th, the 28th through the 31st, and the 1st through the 2nd. These are the timelines of all the visits and the interviews and the things that happened. It could be quite helpful if you're trying to piece together the actual cleanup activities or the discovery activities that were going on. Okay. First witness is a Lieutenant John Sarkisian. That's it. He is been a part of the El Paso Sheriff's Office for 22 years in the Patrol Division. In January, he was Special Operations Division as a SWAT commander, traffic unit, and other small units as well. He was the incident commander for the search efforts. And so they're going to talk about all of the search efforts that were done. Basically, they talk about everywhere that they searched, all the photos that they got, all the information that they got back and forth, how much snow there was, how cold it was, where they searched, what kind of, the weather at that time of year. They talk about all of these different areas around the house and places where they could have been gone. And they talk about finding the board that they believe was used to move the suitcase. It was no secret that they were in the area or what they were doing. Nothing of this was done. None of these searches were done undercover. Okay. The media had also documented all of the search that was done over at Highway 105, and every day they were searching, the media was there. And actually made a note that this was the biggest search anyone he's worked with in over 20 years had been a part of. It was huge, the search for Gannon at that time. Okay. The jury had two questions about the discovery of that board and the location near the fence. Was the board on the west side of the fence? And he answered yes. Was there an opening in the fence? And yes, along the fence, there was no opening until a break in the berm where there is a barbed wire gate. Were there any footprints collected? And he said that the footprints in the area were from them searching. Any of the footprints in the snow was from the searches, anywhere from 30 to 100 of the people walking around there. He does not believe that the FBI collected any footprints from the area other than the personnel that had been through that area at the time. It had snowed, and that they just didn't. There were footprints between the berm and where the board was, but not around the board. That part that I just said came as a follow-up on redirect from the prosecution. They're entering that board to show manipulation into removing the body and hiding what was done. And I thought that was a good ad there, a definitely good ad there. But I think they're doing a great job. I don't know about you guys, but as far as proving she's saying, they're getting there. Okay. Kevin Clark is the next witness, and he does detailed records from cell phones and things like that. All the calls, the text messages to and from devices, data devices, things like that. He testified that it's common during investigations to obtain search warrants, to obtain call detail records. They enter in all of the CDs that contain many of the Life 360 GPS program that was on Letecia's phone, which anyone could find her, which was why the day all after she's doing all her stuff, she left her phone at home. Letecia was pretty smart about how data gets collected through cell phones and things like that. And if you'll remember, when Letecia was representing herself, they filed massive amounts to try to keep all of the ADT inside videos and everything that the alarm system took, okay, of everything that happened inside and outside of the building. And she also tried to actually have all of the cell phones data not admitted into evidence. She fought tooth and nail to get the things that she knew were out there held back. She did when she was representing herself, and yeah, she knew before she changed her plea. So they're going to talk about Gannon's cell phone, Harley's cell phone. They're entering all the discs of everything. Kevin Clark was present during the search of the area. Okay. He said that the GPS showed a vehicle traveling to the area that they searched on the evening of January 28th and Friday night, the 31st, and that it snowed heavily after those days. Okay. They submit some photos of a table in Gannon's room, and that table was in Gannon's room, and it was moved into the garage. Okay. And the photo is from Al's cell phone. Okay. And there is a board on the garage floor, and that photo was taken in November or December of 2019. The board that they found, it appears to be the board that they found on the S-curve on the corner. Okay. And they match it because the corner of the board is broken, and they can see that it's the same. They do a side-by-side comparison of the board that they found and the board in the photo from Al's phone. And the boards are very similar to the broken corner, the horizontal markings, and many other things that make them look the same. On cross-examination, Clark was asked if he took measurements of the board, and he said no, they did not take them. On redirect, it came forward that they have the board and could measure it. The board from the photo could be found based on the measurements of the saw, and Clark believes they appear similar in size, and he did not actually have to measure them to discover so. So they got all that into evidence. They move on to Commander Mitch Mihalko, and he is commander with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office since 2021. He has 20 years total service. He has been on both detentions and the law enforcement side. He's been in law enforcement since 2006. So street cop, supervisor, patrol, detective. He's been a detective for more than 7 years now, and he was recently promoted to commander. He was assigned to financial and organized crimes and sex crimes in SVU, and he was in January of 2020. He was the lieutenant who was overseeing violent crimes at the time in that area. In his jurisdiction, all of the all of Colorado Springs city crimes, El Paso County. He heard from another sergeant about the disappearance of Gannon. He received a briefing in regards to it on January 28th. Because it was such a young child who didn't have money or a phone, and he was out there in the cold, didn't show up in any specific place that they realized a friend or anything. They realized that he may not have made it to any friend's house. So they're looking at either something happened to him or he was kidnapped. Or he just ran away on purpose. They were trying at that point on January 28th, after the conversation, to decide like which direction to go, but they've got to go to all different avenues. They're not going to eliminate any at this point because it could be anything. They don't have any evidence to say one way or another, but they have no friends saying that he's there. Nobody else saw him. They don't see that anything actually happened to them at this point. Just that he's not home. He hasn't returned home. It's cold. He's got no money. His age. It's very it could be that he was kidnapped or removed from the home against his will. So Sarkisian starts the searching. They get all of this, the whole search process. He starts going into it. He became suspicious of Letecia Stauch very early on. He says during the interview, when he's trying to get the search parties together and trying to decide where to search and everything, and trying to get information, that the defendant made several statements that were not congruent with previous statements. They've been trying to get her in for over 24 hours already to try to get enough information to focus more on their search, to go in different leads, to find any lead that they can. It was very difficult to get into any contact with her. At the end of the interview they finally had with her, she said she would come back, and then she just wanted to leave. And he had concerns that because she had been utilizing a cell phone and she'd been in contact with Al, she said, they were so married at the time, and there were multiple texts going back and forth, the communication back and forth. But basically, it was just that she was very difficult to get a hold of, although other people could. And she was the last person to have seen Gannon, and they didn't understand why she wouldn't come in and talk with them. There were conflicting stories. She had false reported saying one thing to patrol duties and another thing to detectives. And that was of a significant concern. As soon as during that day, she gave multiple people different stories or different answers to the same question, they were suspicious right away. He finally got her through her phone, and when he did finally get her into there, he seized her phone. When she finally came in for the interview, and he was able to identify her absolutely He said that in his experience, if he needs to detain someone or evidence pending a search warrant, he knew it was difficult to contact that person. He needs to, once he finally sees them, do everything that he can to get the information. Um, she had diametrically, he says, diametrically different accounts, which was indicative of suspicious behavior. She had been in contact with Al on several devices. In her defense, he knew if she left with any of the devices, it was highly likely she had the opportunity to destroy or delete information entirely, because it was apparent that she knew she was a suspect because she did not want to come in for questioning. He said it was extraordinary circumstances, which is why he did it at that time. They said, well, why would you think like to take her cell phone? And he's saying, well, during my time here as an investigator, it's very common that the evidence that we need is on the cell phones. It's very common that there's plenty to lead you in directions. His cell phones have a lot of evidence. Okay, so they enter her teal cased iPhone into evidence and show Office Commander Mihalko, and he says that's the one that he seized. They're just clearing up how it was protected, how they got the stuff off of it. Then they start talking about the searches. They talk about the patrolmen's doing the initial walkthroughs through the houses on the 28th, the 29th, on February 3rd and 5th, again on the 13th, the 21st, and the 28th. He said it became apparent after the first and second interviews that foul play had occurred inside the house. On February 2nd, they applied for a warrant to seize and hold the residence for the first time. They did not do that prior because they were being let in for, like, they had access to the home. Every lead they uncovered brought them back to a piece from that house. Detectives ended up changing the locks on the residence and to disabling the garage door to prevent anybody from coming in there and altering anything else that could be used as evidence into what happened. It became very apparent that something happened inside the home. With no body, it's very hard to investigate. They didn't know what they were looking for at the time. They just know that everything that they did discover led to more and more, and it started to look more harrowing that something had happened there. He believed that violence happened in that home, that the bloodstain pattern and the blood staining in Gannon's room on the wall near his bed clearly indicated him that something had happened, that there was a large amount of blood that had seeped through the carpet to the concrete floor. And that's consistent with many murder scenes that he's responded to in the past, and that's how he started to treat it. His investigators team, he felt, was acting appropriately, but as additional information came to light, they realized that everything needed to be locked down because there was more and more coming up. They found the sneakers, they found some cleanup stuff. Some people are smelling bleach. Now they find stuff in the basement. They're finding drops of blood on the stairs, in the hallway, into the laundry room, many places. And they're trying to figure out exactly what happened. In that storage room became of concern. At this time also, he reports that Letecia was totally not cooperating with the investigation or acting like a typical parent would in a missing child's case. He reported that most missing child cases, the parents are there offering any information they can, offering to do anything. You actually have to pry them away from the investigation to make them sit and wait somewhere. He said they're actually more active and want to help even more. He said he was able to observe her interactions with media and social media as well as during the police interviews, and he does not believe she was not sane. He believes she was very sane at any point. It appeared to him that she was very cognizant of what was occurring and took specific, methodical steps in and redirecting investigators of this effort and all investigative efforts that were occurring. He says that these things that she did caused efforts and resources to be directed away from the crime scene. Okay. Defense was not very pleased with that type of testimony, so they came back at him a little bit because of exact days from when it's like they pinpointed on, okay, when is the exact date and time that it went from runaway to missing? And he said, no, it was in the first couple of days. It was very confusing at that point, and they were still considering all options. There wasn't enough information like to narrow it down. The cross-examination then asked, when Letecia was asked if she could see her phone, she held it out slightly and he took control of it. Well, she clasped her hand around it and tried to hold it back. Okay. And that's when he decided that it was going to be seized. They have a little bit of a tip-to-tip back and forth about the date when Al came back and they met at Starbucks. Mihalko was unclear, but he does know that on January 29th, Letecia's interview, that's when her phone was seized. He also knows that on February 7th was the actual seizure of the home and lockdown. From the 29th to the 7th, 8 or 9 days in between, yes, they were in and out of there, and they were still gathering evidence and doing things, but it wasn't locked down. It's important to have why he's questioned as to why they locked it down at that point, and he said it was absolutely important to lock it down to preserve the evidence, and that's why he seized Letecia's phones. That's why all the phones were seized. At this point, they had no body, and there was concern there was additional leads coming in. It was the possibility that Letecia herself was misleading them directly. This is when it... Defense says, well, if you feel someone's lying to you, I mean, this was good. Defense goes, well, then why did you arrest her for an attempt to influence a public servant? It's like, because there was more information she could provide to us. It wasn't that she was just like, just doing it for shits and giggles. She was misdirecting. She was actively probably involved in the crime, and that's what they had to figure out. If she had been... The commander correctly informs defense that if she had been arrested on the 29th, she would not have the opportunity to dispose of Gannon's body in Florida, correct? And he says, well, true. He says false reporting would receive a summons. Attempt to influence is an extremely low bond. People are not out quickly. He tells defense they're reaching by making assumptions about what would have happened on the 29th. By not arresting Letecia at that time does not mean that she wouldn't have disposed of the body in X and like. We don't know what would have happened. We just know they didn't have enough evidence to arrest her at that time or detain her at that time. They had suspicions because she was acting funny. But what were they going to charge her with? Acting weird? Telling them half-truths? She could always say, my child is missing and I'm upset. They were really trying to figure it out. They were highly suspicious. And they are actually going in that direction. But they need direction, okay? So the prosecutors come back. And the prosecutor says, just tell us about, why, why there was no push on the 29th to arrest her. And they clearly put out the information there that to make an arrest in a felony case, you need probable cause. You cannot arrest on a mere suspicion. No probable cause on January 29th. The main reason Letecia was not held. It had been achieved in March, unfortunately, not preventing the disposal of Gannon's body. The finding of Gannon's body gave probable cause. A suitcase that came from the house. She was the last one to see him, and now we have a body. Boom. Okay, we didn't have a suitcase or a body. We just had her misdirecting people in January. Unfortunately, like I said, it could have been sooner if there was enough, okay, but there wasn't at the time. The move of the body from Colorado to Florida shows a very calculated person, and the distance shows a great attempt to hide evidence. Now, this is a clear and valid point. Something the defense doesn't want us to focus on is the activity after the 29th when her phone got seized, when she went through great lengths to move as far away as possible to get the body and all incriminating evidence that she could away from the scene, including herself traveling. Well, she still had it with her and she needed to do something with the body. And she found a way. This is very calculating. This is the activity of a sane person, in my opinion. A desperate person, but totally sane. I don't think someone who actually did this in an insanity would go this far. Yeah, when they play the tape of her talking with Al, it's very annoying because, especially the whining, because they're playing all those tapes about immunity and everything. I agree, Sandra. And yes, about the board, I also agree there. Always, I absolutely agree. I think at this point, I'm going to actually put a picture of Gannon up instead. We got another 30 minutes, but I'm tired of looking at anything to do with actually her. Um, let's just I'll put Gannon up. There we go. That's a little bit better. I know. They have a 5 hour call. Yeah, always. I heard that on Wednesday that they had a big 5 hour call of going back and forth coming in on Friday. It's going to be long, but I think it'll be busted up. Hopefully it won't go straight through. I can't imagine. We normally get breaks like like during the 4 hour breaks. We get two sessions of 4.5 hours and we get like two breaks usually in between, or at least one, you know? Yes. He was a lovely child, wasn't he? Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you would. I would rather look at that for the next half hour. I don't know about you guys. All right, so let's just finish up the next. So they pushed back against the defense about the probable cause, and I think they did a good job there. The next witness was CSI Elisa Beresford. They're going to enter more photos. Okay, she is a senior CSI again. Okay, for Colorado Springs Metro. He has been She has been an expert 20 times in crime scenes. She has done witness testimony. She does get qualified as a witness in blood stain pattern analysis. So basically, if you don't mind me just cutting to this so we can get to the next day, she is going to testify about the blood stains, about the patterns, about it all being a violent act that happened. She testified that the bloodstains from the bedroom would say that something violent might have happened there. Bloodstains are tested for DNA to link them to an injury to a particular person. She said when blood is dried, it's hard to clean up. Blood becomes lighter and more transparent as you attempt to clean it up. The well-defined edges of the patterns starts to blur, indicating it has been cleaned up. Most of the blood spatter that they did find that was left was attempted to be cleaned. Okay. She testified that a cleaning agent applied on blood on a wall, it can cause it to run down a wall behind electrical sockets. You can see wipe marks. She says it's very evident that the scene was attempted to be cleaned from blood. She was on the scene on the 3rd of February. She then was asked to come and look for physical blood evidence at the Stauch home after she had been on another call about a potential clandestine grave in another youth sports area. All right. She focused on the bedroom. She went through a walkthrough. It was processed from the exterior inwards using a less intrusive investigative efforts just to make sure that they were covering all the areas. She focused on the southeast basement bedroom and visible bloodstains on two walls, the baseboards, the floor area. all over that room. They're going to submit lots of pictures and swabs and things like that. They're going to be entering a lot of evidence at this point. But basically, she was in charge of bloodstain and collection in the photos. They start to submit all of the photos of Gannon's room, with the bed was removed and the carpet and padding had been cut. The bloodstain, each black rectangular is a minimum of 1 splatter stain, and that is on all the pictures that they're showing, and they've got them all marked out. That there was some type of external force that applied to get the blood to splatter it this way. Because it actually was attempted to be cleaned up, they can't exactly show the exact pattern like they do when they do blood spatter analysis. There is no exact pattern because, like she said, when you attempt to clean it up, it alters it along the edges. It can make it drip. It can make it seep. So there was some difficulty in that part. It can show directionality, okay? And it was evident that she keeps repeating that the evidence was strong, that the whole scene was attempted to be cleaned up and very efficiently. She, again, on cross-examination, when asked, like, what is her opinion in regards to the blood spat, but she can't actually be definite. She said that she actually does believe that it was a very violent event. And it was multiple events, not just one. Because of the blunt force impacts of different mechanisms, you could get different directions for the blood spatter and the drops. And that could absolutely be why they're going in different directions. Plus that the fact that they were being cleaned up. She said that the blood spatter could be from all different types of mechanisms. In other words, they could be from the gunshot wound, or the blunt force trauma, or the sharp force injuries that Gannon received. The blood was coming from different directions, which means it was a violent act. It wasn't just all in one shot. The juries had questions. Does anything about the bloodstain pattern at the crime scene suggest a chronological order of events? A lot of information, she answered, was cleaned away. She could not tell any order of it. In other words, because of the cleaning and because of the condition of what she was left to actually analyze and look at, all the cleaning that was done, all the things that had been moved, she could not tell any order of event at the time. The stains were consistent with all of the different mechanisms that had been reported. Gunshot, sharp force trauma, blunt force trauma, or any combination of them. I think this jury asks excellent questions. They do. Don't you agree? Yeah. They absolutely ask fantastic questions. Anna, they're not saying, no one has testified to that yet, but there's lots of speculation. There is a call to where you hear that Gannon himself says that he's more worried about his arms. And Letecia has said repeatedly that he had burns on his arms due to this candle thing. We're not sure if that could be an event of abuse or not, but that is the only one that's being referred to. Even Harley states she did not see any abruptness in her treatment of Gannon, that anything had changed. So it's not sure. It just seemed awfully violent what happened at the end. I would say it was definitely an extreme situation. I know she keeps hiding behind her hair and pretending. Yes, she does. Like, she doesn't want to look or hear any of it. And she can't be bothered, you know. As far as this expert, yes, always. She was very good at her explanations of all the splatter evidence and the attempts at the cleanup. She was very clear that there was absolutely obstruction there to try to hinder that investigation with the blood. There was total methodical treatment of the evidence, not the evidence, but what was left behind, and that is supposedly had been done by Letecia. Always says I do feel she burned him either by trying to set a fire and burn the home or with intent to harm him. Oh, that makes me sad, but you could be right. I would not be surprised. Hey, Mrs. Cassandra. The experts have not been able to know enough about the burns due to the decomposition of the body. This is true. There was not enough there. They only know what he said and what she said. We have no physical evidence of any of it. We do have the candle wax picture and things like that, but basically we only have Letecia's statements basically on that regard to it, and we all know that you cannot really trust anything that she says. Everything that she says is like not coming out as not being true or reliable in any way. Okay. The next witness is also on bloodstain, and he is a forensic consultant for bloodstain pattern analysis with the CSI unit in construction. His name is Tom Griffin. He's been with CSI for over 4 years. He's a private consultant. Okay. He said that in his analysis, spatter stain is any small blood stain that can generally be circular or elliptical that was formed as a result of some motion putting the blood into flight. He says that non-spatter stain is a larger category of blood stain, not containing only circles and ellipses, but smeared blood or pools or absorbed blood, any blood or blood stain pattern that has something besides just circles and ellipticals. Okay. They talked about BPA limitations and best practices. Okay. He said it's best to do these kinds of testing to a scene and have photographs and everything. It's possible to do the scene visit and have photographs. Okay. He says that he usually does that, and he reviews autopsy results. Okay. So that he can make a more expert opinion on the blood stain and how it occurred. He said that cleaning or wiping a scene can limit results from an analysis. Anything removing or altering the bloodstains can affect the physical characteristics of them and limits identifying the patterns or using them for direction and velocity, force, and the type of trauma that occurred. He said that minimal information was available to him in February of 2020, but he did receive over 350 images of the scene. And he looked at them, and he preliminarily concluded that the stains were very small, primary spatter, could not say more than that without further examination. He then visited the home on the 26th of February and did a walkthrough, and he focused in Gannon's bedroom also. He said he tried to stay very objective. He compared what he saw in person to the photos. He did no magnification of the images. He just compared them. The stains on the wall were like 1 millimeter or less, and the width of the edge of a dime. There were blood stains on the wall, both above and below the height of the bed. There were labels on the south and east west walls that he could see there that were left there by Beresford. Okay. They enter in evidence showing the markers on the wall, photographs showing Gannon's room with the markers all identified as this expert is indicating that he saw when he came in. He relies upon the information and photo and things that he receives, but he does like to do the scene analysis just so that he can characterize what he's actually seeing and provide a written report based on that he either concurs or doesn't. Okay. He points out, the height of the bed, how we can tell where the height of the bed is based on where the stickers are and the arrows. And he states that the blood stains were nonlinear. Okay. And it eliminates the presence of identifying pattern. He noticed that along the baseboards, the appearance was of diluted blood, as if some had pulled up there, and that there was some of it flowed along the horizontal edge of the baseboard, suggesting diluting action of the blood stains. In other words, cleaning. Okay. There are, he said, in regards to the walls and the bloodstain, potential void areas in Gannon's room on the wall near the window that were not affected at all by the blood or the staining. His preliminary assessment that he gave to Sergeant Hubble and Lieutenant Mahalko on the 26th was that he said it could be subject to change, but given that the pooling and the spatter stains of the nature of the patterns, they're not there, he would look at one or more combination of three events: a shooting in which the wound is penetrating and no exit wound, creating blunt force trauma such as beating or stomping, some kind of action or energetic activity involved a bladed object, but not necessarily a knife. He said all of these could account for the blood splatter that he was looking at. When he read the autopsy report, he noted that there was blunt force trauma. There was also a penetrating gunshot wound to the jaw or face and sharp injuries to the rest of the body. This was all conclusive to the type of splatter and the type of staining that he saw in the room. He said that one of the splatter marks totally indicates that Gannon was on or near the floor for at least one or two of the splatter producing events. The prosecution did ask him if he can make an assumption about whether or not Gannon would be up and walking, and the defense vehemently objected to this due to the scope of the expertise, and it was sustained because he was an after expert. Okay. They also asked if it would be helpful for the jury to have, and that got objected to. They didn't even sustain. They wanted him to stay to just what his understanding of the report that he gave was. They're not going to get into how he thinks the crime was committed, because that was not in his report. And that was the part that the defense objected to, and it got sustained because it's valid. It would be absolutely new information that the defense was not aware of. Oh, you have a theory on the candle, do you always? I'm really pleased with how the jury's actually asking questions, very good questions. Yeah, they haven't been able to actually address the burns at all, really. They just, once the body was found. Again, they redirect that the cleanup and the ability, it really kind of hindered the ability to find other sizes of bloodstains on the wall. It was evident that things were cleaned up. There is no maximum number of events that it says. You can't say like how many based on the bloodstains, but they can say that all of the events reported and all of the injuries reported in the autopsy could have produced the blood spatter that was in Gannon's room. All of them. Okay. Detective Pete Woods was our next witness. He's 7 years to the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI. Right now, he's with the Myrtle Beach Police Department. Been there for over 16 years. On March 2020, he was still assigned to that Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI. They were made aware that Letecia would be dropping Harley off at the Myrtle Beach Air Force recruitment station. After Harley was dropped off, they thought it would be the best time to take her into custody. This is when Letecia got arrested. And that's basically all that they reported. They reported that she's the one who dropped off Harley. They reported that she was driving a minivan with belongings in it, and it was taken to the Myrtle Beach Annex. She did comply with this arrest. The van was processed later that night. They did a walk around and noticed a suitcase. They obtained a search warrant for the suitcase. They are going to submit a bunch of photos of the van that she was driving that day, photos of envelopes, things that they found in the van. There's a pink suitcase and a white suitcase in the back. There was a cell phone in the driver's seat. They just documented everything that they found in it. There was suspected blood on a blue blanket that they found in there. He says that during this, when they brought her in and during her encounter, part of the questions that the prosecution asked at the very end, if he was made aware by Letecia of any medical issues. And he said, no. He said, so Letecia did not address any medical issues in the portion of the interview that you watched or you had with her? And he said, absolutely not. Defense brought up the fact they wanted to know if the phone says Tisha, Tila, or it says Tila, and it said Tila instead of Tisha. It's our next witness. There was no actual questions from the jury, and that was the only question from the defense for cross-examination. The next witness is Detective John Price. He's from the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. He's been there for 21 years. He was a homicide detective in 2020 of January. He went to the home 5 or 6 times, looking for new information. You know, after he retrieves any other information in regards, he would go back to the home to look for anything that he could. He had assisted in the Tiguan search of the vehicle. The Jetta was searched on January 31st. They enter in quite a few exhibits. Let me give you a link to this one too. This is our last day, Tuesday rather. Leticia's passport, library card, you know, they had it inside the car was an envelope that had a lot of stuff in it. Remember, Letecia kept trying to get everything back. Yep. On cross-examination, cross-examination, they went in there and asked what was tested. They said many things were tested on exam. They were looking for all kinds of things, blood, DNA, whatever, different soil and vegetation that would say where locations were. The vehicles were searched before the house was locked down and seized. He's asked why did it take so long to lock down the house, and he says he doesn't know. He said insects were collected from the vehicles to try to figure out where the car had been. The typical CSI stuff, everything was analyzed. Okay. They asked questions about cruises and traveling and when passports are needed or not. I didn't really think that was as necessary. There was no other questions, no redirect, and no questions by the jury. The next witness is Amber Cronin. They enter in a 1 hour and 4 minute long exhibit of a tape and another 29 minutes. At least 3 of them have already been played and we didn't have to listen to them again. In January of 2020, Amber Cronin was assigned working at the prison. Okay. She had daily meetings with include the FBI. Assignments would be for she does the phone calls between Al and Letecia. They were recorded. She was one of the people in the room listening and advising Al to ask additional questions. This is all in regards to the tapes that we heard in the conversations. Okay. All about how they're paying for hotels, things like that. I don't think we really need to go into great detail of that. You've all heard it all before. So I'm going to give you this for the phone calls. First, that's the ready for the witnesses for the day. This is the one for the phone calls. Okay. And let's just finish up with our last day here, which is Wednesday, because today is Thursday, which is the break-in trial. Okay. Okay. Oh, wait. So, wait, that one may not be a complete link. Hold on. This next one has more of the call. All right. So just in case one doesn't work, use the other one there. Okay. Also, if you'd rather listen to it and not look at the words, this is the audio transcript. Okay. But it's a messed up audio. Audio is not very good. Honestly. Okay. So Agent Cronin gets recalled for the next day, for Wednesday morning. Um, Agent Cronin was the one who was present for all of the calls and all the other calls that were through the prison. Same approach from Al in the calls, trying to get information and details from where Gannon may be. Remember how heart-wrenching it was to listen to Al Stauch trying to get Letecia to say where Gannon was. She's just worried about herself. She's changing the stories. Every day he gets something new, and he's slowly starting to realize that she may have something to do with it. She's guilty. I mean, he already knew she lied about where the vehicle was, so he went to the police. He was just scared that it may be her, like something. He just wanted to find Gannon. My heart is just blown away. Blown away. Oh, she wouldn't even tell him where she was. Also, check that website link right there. Because wait a minute. What is that? Nope, it's good. All right. So basically, you know everything that happened in that transcript. It was heartbreaking. He eventually just gets to the point where he can't deal with her anymore. And again, remember, after those calls all through the end of January, through the middle of February, and then he just broke off. She wouldn't say where she was. She wouldn't come back in the she wouldn't come back to where the house. She wouldn't say where she was. She wouldn't cooperate with the investigation. Um, Talks about the different people that she indicated that were there at the house, the Quincy man, and all of that. All the time that was wasted on the investigation because of the lies she told is absolutely, absolute. I mean, she was poking out somebody from the internet that she knew was a sex offender just to take the heat off of her. But they followed up, and it couldn't possibly have been okay. Um, Remember that they referenced all of those phone calls. There was actually a phone call, which is going to be evidence 333, which was between the defendant and Agent Cronin. Okay. Um, they actually play that on this day. It's like 30 minutes long, and then he's asked more questions. Um, Basically, in regards to that call, it's consistent through all the different phone calls. It seems like she is more focused on herself than trying to help find Gannon. Sometimes, when specifically talking about Gannon, she may tell you something to explain away evidence that was advertised that they found, or maybe hadn't even been publicized that they had found. Evidence only someone involved would know about, like talking about the blood in Gannon's room. That was never made public in media or social media. The blood on the wall and the floor were kept private. This is all from Gannon. Okay. She was exhibiting strong knowledge that the blood existed. She was providing explanations for why the blood might be there. Talking about the board, it was in the news that they were searching in that area, and that's when the discussion of the Craigslist looking for a bicycle story started coming out. A way to explain away being in that area instead of the fact that she used the board over there. She knew the GPS would show her in that area. She made a story to cover it. When they were talking about bringing her into the call, she stepped out of the room to be able to take the call. Her demeanor quickly changed quite a bit. Confrontational with Al throughout the phone call, calm for Amber. Defense objects on speculation about what that meant, and the judge actually overruled it. Amber thought the significant pause in her speaking when they hooked up the three-way call gave her the impression she might have been reluctant to speak with her. In her experience, when people find out she's an FBI agent, people treat her differently. Okay. This is the transcript to that call with Agent Amber Cronin. I hope this goes through. Okay. That's the transcript to that one. The last 30-minute one that they're talking about. That's the good link to it. The call ended abruptly. Letecia had called Al back immediately. And the beginning of the call was a discussion about getting the bike from the southern Douglas County, where the bloody board was found. This is an example of her explaining why she would be in that area. In other words, she's trying to convince Al while she was there, the detective why she was there. She's crafting a story as they speak. During the course of the investigations, her movements around town and across the country were tracked using different methods. Telematics on the vehicle, GPS placed on a rental vehicle. She had phone records. Okay. Telematics is used tracking GPS. It's a sort of GPS on your vehicle. New vehicles come with that built into the software. Her second story was about an intruder in the house. We have now heard multiple, couldn't give a number due to some very majorly different versions of it, but some were only minor differences, some were major, but there was multiple different stories of it. There was no evidence ever to support that a stranger had broken into the house and attacked her. No evidence to support a stranger had broken into the house and or kidnapped Gannon. No evidence of anyone else being there. Of all the evidence that is left everywhere, there is none that anybody else was there. All right. This is the transcript of that last one, the last phone call. There were several. The phone calls are interesting because when you hear her actually, going on and on about this stuff, it's ridiculous, So I'm going to see if there's actually, there was no questions for the jury on the phone calls. But basically it's all, those phone calls were all in mid-February. They document that she told a lot of different stories, admitting that there was Gannon's blood. She did admit it. It said that something had happened to Gannon and Gannon was possibly dead. Why not make an arrest then? This is what was asked directly of them. And it's not really their decision. It's the decision of the district attorneys to determine when they have enough to get an arrest warrant. They were in contact with everyone, and there just didn't seem to be enough. That arrest warrant was on February 28th, per prosecution. Cronin is unsure of the exact date that she traveled, but it was early March. You need probable cause that someone had been murdered. Without Gannon's body being found, they didn't know he was murdered. Not having a body can hinder the investigation and the prosecution. This is why they're saying it took so long. If he had been kidnapped, they wouldn't have a homicide investigation. There are inherent difficulties present when there is no body. It's hard to determine if he is missing because he is abducted, kidnapped, and hurt, or if he's dead. They don't know he's dead. They can't see that anything happened. They know something happened in that room. They're piecing it together piece by piece, but they're not sure exactly to the extent and whether he's dead. They have a high suspicion, and they know that someone was in the house with him, and they know they see he and Letecia entering that house again themselves in the early afternoon. They never see Gannon leave. The last detective was Detective John Grushin of the day. Okay. He's been with the FBI in Denver for 25 years. It's like a behavioral unit. The decision for him, the transition for him out of the FBI towards the school district where he now works was in 2013, but he had a lot of FBI experience prior to that. He said, pattern of behavior is not a generalized pattern of behavior or very specific. Okay. Both the FBI and Secret Service have studied for years and years, meaning that we as human beings exhibit almost predictors before we do something we're going to regret later. It starts with grievance. You wrestle with how you're going to deal with that, and you have an idea of how you're going to deal with it. Sometimes not healthy. If we have stabilizers in our life, we'll figure out a better way to deal with things. Then planning what you're going to do, you take steps or preparation. Then you do a breach, which is you decide which is what you're going to enter into, almost a point of not going back. And then you do. If someone is on a pathway of violence, you try to figure out what the grievance is. He had been insisting the Colorado Springs residents liaise on cases involving missing adults and children. The supervisor, John Cronin, had asked him to assist with the Stauch case. He came in about 2 weeks in. Investigators asked him to listen to one of Letecia's phone calls with Al to see if he could assist because they had no idea where Gannon was, and to see what they could do as far as, where to go from there, if there was anything. He said that Letecia was misdirecting the authorities. After listening to the call, he spoke with Al and the investigative team. He said if they didn't accuse Letecia of killing Gannon, she would keep talking and possibly give them information. He's one of the reasons that they kept the conversations going. He said she was obviously misdirecting them. She was obviously telling stories that this was how they were going to catch him, or have her leak more information they could use to find him. There was a sidebar objection, but nobody was privy to it, so I couldn't really tell you what happened. Okay. He goes on to say that part of the strategy was to keep her talking because she would give information that was outside of the margins or could lead to Gannon or to what had happened to him. She was the last person to be with Gannon. She was their best source of information. Letecia, he said, was constantly more concerned with herself than helping find Gannon or what may have happened to him. She was at the center of her own universe in that regard. He said that everything was revolving around her. Every story she told, every type of event, she translated all the information she received just basically as it occurred to her only. She consistently misled the investigation. She was pretending to be in Colorado Springs when she was in South Carolina, and her stories changed, and it affected the law enforcement response to say Gannon walked away from the friend's house. She often gave misstatements to anyone who asked her. She tried to shift the blame to other people, including Al and Landon and her ex-husband, and other people who existed, like Quincy. Okay. She said that she was coaching Al. She was preparing him in little ways for things that he might hear and giving excuses for it all the way. It was not good. There are more calls of transcripts. I'm going to actually give you this trial date here. I'm going to check for questions. Hold on one second. Basically, they go on. They talk about all the different stories that she tells, in regards to the Petco, building her escape hatch. She says that about them trying to be abducted outside of the Petco, about the guy being in the car. They had already shot down the Eduardo story, so they were talking. She then started to talk about an accident, and then came up the Quentin story because they had actually taken him and he was in Mexico. She needed another one. She knew that wasn't going to be able to move forward. So then she started, she wants a relationship with Al, decided that the accident scenario would be try to get some sympathy, He even tried to bolster her up in as if he was on her side to see if she would come forward, but she never did. He tried to build up an escape hatch, for her, just with coming through with the truth, but it never worked. He asked why she would keep him out of school. She continued to blame Gannon by saying he was acting up, that he wasn't acting right. She puts a lot of the responsibility on what happened that day, with Gannon just not being home. And then she has him, being abducted from Petco. And now we don't have any other new suspect to check, and she's getting frantic. And you can hear in the conversations it's just going round and round. Oh, there was just so much more in regards to, I'm going to give you the transcript for that one. But that was it. That's it for that day. Mostly just small telephone stuff, on and on. That's a long time. We've been here for 2 hours. I'm going to check you for questions, but this case is horrible. I'm going to check my poll too. I'm going to give it a minute, and then I want you guys to just, if you haven't voted already, please do. Have I noticed that Letecia is sitting, writing, or doodling? The more saying the witnesses and testimony make her appear, the more she changes which hand she is using. You know what? I think so. I love how Judge Werner, after sitting through these phone calls, asked the jury if the volume was too loud and then said he was going to turn it down some. Exactly, because some of it was, he's very considerate. He's always asking the staff how they're doing. He's considerate to the witnesses. He's doing the best he can without violating his order. He doesn't want a lot of stuff out there. He's doing what he can with the audio and the stuff. It's not supposed to be televised, but I get it. I do have a lot of respect for him. And has the state made a case leaning towards sane, leaning towards insanity? Well, and I am very respectful that 22% of you have said that you are not sure yet, and I can hear you. But the majority of you are with me. It's 72% saying the state's doing a pretty good job leaning towards sane in regards to her covering up the crimes. And I think on that, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to wrap it up. It's been a long day. There's going to be plenty more on Letecia starting with tomorrow and going into next week. And we'll do another update in the middle of next week for you. Again, if there's anything I didn't cover in regards to the last couple of days of trial with Letecia, or you want further information, just go ahead and tag me on the back of the video. Ask me. I can, if I don't have the answer, I can help you find it. There's plenty of resources out here. I link as many of them as I can. Please give them the due credit they deserve for gathering the information. A lot of this comes from actual reporters that are in the room watching, other people that are watching, documenting or reporting back, and going to another party who puts it all in one place. It's coming from places like Recovery Addict, in Law and Crime, okay, and directly from the WebEx itself, which if you go to the Reddit, there's a link all the time there. You could go to the WebEx, and on any day you can log in and listen to the trial and see some audio. It's in 2 parts, just so that you know. When they break for lunch, it's going to cut the feed and you have to sign up again. Okay. And thank you very much always. I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you've done also. And thank you all for enjoying the conversation and help keep me go. Again, I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back in the evening. The Masterson trial started this week. We're in jury selection. There's already been quite a bit of shenanigans, and we'll be covering that tomorrow in the evening. And on that, I'm going to say good night to Gannon. Justice for Gannon, everyone. Let's hope that this trial has the outcome it should, and that Letecia Stauch does pay. We know she's going to pay one way or another. This is a terrible, terrible case. And we just hope there is definite evidence that she did something. And now that she admitted it, she's not going to get away with it. It's just how she gets penalized. That's what we're looking at. Okay. On that, thank you. And thank you always for helping with your research too. I appreciate it. And thanks for the conversation, everybody. I will see you tomorrow.